on Jaguar Gatorade, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about a dumb decision made during the Eastern Illinois-Northern Illinois game on Thursday, and some of the worst clock management you're ever going to see. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And join me tonight on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern for a very special Tuesday night edition of NFL Trivia, where you'll have a chance to test your football knowledge for cash prizes. Link to play below. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want you to imagine this scenario. It's opening day of a brand new season, and you've got tickets to go to the game. You're playing a team that, on paper, you're expected to beat pretty badly, as just about everyone thinks you're going to win this game. However, you lose in heartbreaking fashion, starting the season off on a surprisingly rough note. You're dejected, disappointed, and just about every emotion under the sun to describe the feeling you get when your team loses on the final play of the game to a team that they probably should not have lost to. And then, as you're getting ready to leave the stadium to make the drive back home and contemplate what you just watched, Lady Gaga comes out and does a full-on concert. Seems absolutely bizarre, right? You're having one of the biggest musical artists of a generation, and one of the biggest singers of all time, performing a concert directly after the game? Yeah, we sometimes see post-game concerts in baseball, but those concerts only last a few songs, and the vibe is totally different. It's not a fully fledged 20-song concert that goes on for 2 hours, and it's especially not after a football game. But in 1983, the New England Patriots had an idea. What if we got the Beach Boys to perform after the game? We'll get people to come for the season opener, and then get them to stay another 2 hours for a concert by one of the biggest musical groups of all time. Wouldn't this be nice? Well, this was an absolutely crazy idea. Especially at a time where not a single big-time musical artist performed at halftime of the Super Bowl in front of 100 million people at a national television audience. Let's get the Beach Boys to give some of their good vibrations in a post-game concert after a Patriots game. It was a bold idea, and it just about almost paid off. Because this is the story behind the craziest promotion in the over 60-year history of the New England Patriots franchise. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand the game that was being played, as well as why the Patriots were contemplating doing this in the first place. It's September 4th, 1983. It's week 1 of a brand new NFL season that looks like it will be a full season after the absolute train wreck that was the previous 1982 season, and we've got an AFC East matchup on our hands over in Foxborough at Sullivan Stadium between the Baltimore Colts and the New England Patriots. Aside from the fact that Pats fans were excited about a brand new season, especially coming off of a 1982 season where they made the playoffs, even though just about anyone with a pulse made the playoffs that year, Pats fans were excited about this game because not only was it against a division rival, but because it was a game that they were expected to win. They were playing a Baltimore team that went winless the year before, going 0-8-1, a Baltimore team that they beat by 2 possessions the year before, and they were doing this at a stadium where they only lost 1 game in 1982. This seemed like a good game on paper for the Pats to start off their season, as if all went according to plan, Pats fans should be leaving Sullivan Stadium on this day with a win. The only problem? It didn't look like too many Pats fans were going to show up. And the reason for that? Well, it seemed to stem from the fact that this game took place on Sunday, September 4th, which was before Labor Day. It's not like this anymore, but back in the day, the NFL used to start the season before Labor Day. And as you might be able to tell, this posed a ton of problems from a ratings and an attendance standpoint with many teams and many markets, to the point where I am shocked that they didn't make the switch to starting the season after Labor Day sooner. Labor Day weekend is the unofficial last weekend of the summer, and for many Americans, they want to spend that outside doing something active, like going to the beach, or going golfing, or going to a barbecue, or if you're a kid, hanging out with friends, especially since for many kids in the Northeast, school starts the day after Labor Day. Heck, it might even be starting today where you live. People want to take advantage of the 3-day weekend, and they don't necessarily want to spend it at a football game. And while quite a few teams had this problem anytime they were scheduled to play before Labor Day, the Patriots seemed to have one of the most noteworthy attendance problems. Twice in franchise history before 1983, they opened the season at home before Labor Day. Both times, the game failed to sell out, and the game drew one of their smallest crowds of the season. In 1978, New England opened up the season at home against Washington on September 3rd. That game drew just 55,037 fans. If you look at this chart showing their attendance on a per-game basis that season, that opener against Washington was, by more than 2,000 fans, their lowest number of the year. And in 1981, New England opened up the season at home against the Baltimore Colts. That game drew just 49,572 fans, and set the tone for a disastrous 1981 season where they went 2-14 and got the number 1 pick in the draft, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And you can't even attribute either of those poor attendance figures to the team being bad the year before. In both 1977 and 1980, the Pats had a winning record, so they were entering those respective seasons with momentum on their side and a general sense of excitement in the air. So when the Patriots saw their schedule come out and saw that they were opening the season at home on Labor Day weekend, they had a feeling that they were in some serious trouble from an attendance standpoint, even if they never publicly made their concerns known for obvious reasons. And in the week leading up to the game, the Pats were in full-on panic mode, because they looked at their ticket numbers and looked at what they were projecting in terms of attendance for this game against the Colts, and woo boy, it was not pretty. Only 31,000 tickets were sold for this game, in a stadium that holds over 60,000 spectators. I don't care whether you call the stadium half full or half empty. That is embarrassingly bad. So the Patriots needed to figure out a way to increase sales and make the stadium look full. Their first idea, which they went through with, was to give away 7,500 free tickets to their 7,500 season ticket holders. In reality, the Patriots had 30,000 season tickets sold, but they were on 7,500 different accounts. So as a token of appreciation, that definitely wasn't a last-ditch effort done not even 72 hours before the game. They gave everyone an additional free ticket. How this worked, seeing as inevitably, you had season ticket holders who sat next to each other who did not have free seats next to them, so parties would be getting split up, I have no idea. But I am laughing at the fact that the Pats said that they gave these out, I kid you not, to celebrate the fact that Sullivan Stadium just got a new sound system. Imagine if the Jaguars gave out free tickets to celebrate the fact that they improved the plumbing system at TIAA Bank Field. Riveting. But the second idea, and the one that was the true Hail Mary, was to have a post-game concert afterwards. Not only are you buying a ticket for the Pats game, but you get 2 for the price of 1, as right after the game, you would have none other than the Beach Boys performing. That's right. The Patriots were going to try, on incredibly short notice, to get the Beach Boys to headline a show after the game. And when I mean that it was short notice, I truly mean short notice. The game was on September 4th, and the very first report of any interest in getting this deal done was on August 28th, 1 week before kickoff. In the eyes of the Patriots, and in the eyes of Michael Chamberlain, the president of the Stadium Management Corporation in charge of Sullivan Stadium, this plan was brilliant. Maybe people weren't willing to come to a football game, but throwing a concert from the Beach Boys? You might be able to sell some tickets and possibly avoid a blackout. For those who don't know who the Beach Boys are, they're one of the biggest musical acts of all time. They were the kings of the California surf sound of the 1960s, singing about summer and the beach and surfing and girls. A lot of people associate the music of summer with the Beach Boys, and it's not hard to see why. Even more than half a century, or close to 60 years later, their songs are still ingrained in pop culture in a way that not many artists from the 1960s are. From songs like Surfing USA, to I Get Around, to Good Vibrations, just about everyone has heard at least one Beach Boys song, whether intentional or not, in their life. And even in the early 1980s, though they were definitely past their prime, they had some hits, netting 2 hits inside the top 20 of the Billboard Hot 100 in 1981, although one of them was a medley of their old songs, at a time where literally everything was being turned into a medley. Seriously, medleys were all the rage in 1981. Stars on 45 says hi. And even though this idea seems far-fetched, that getting the Beach Boys to perform after an NFL game would actually increase attendance in a substantial way, to the point where the hefty fee you'd have to pay them to play would be worth it, the crazy part was that in 1983, this is kind of what the Beach Boys were already doing. Granted, it wasn't at a football game, but they spent the entire summer touring the country and playing directly after sporting events. And just about every single time, the event was a rousing success. to the point where attendance increased significantly. Beach Boys night at baseball games and soccer games was a cheat code, almost like Star Wars night is today. That summer, the Denver Bears, a AAA baseball team, decided to do a doubleheader, where they play their game and then have the Beach Boys perform. Usually, the Bears draw 2,000 fans per game playing at Mile High Stadium. For Beach Boys night, they drew 45,000 fans. Not 4,500, 45,000. Their attendance increased more than 22 times over. That same summer, Team America, a North American soccer league team that played their games at RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C., drew an average of 14,000 fans per game. When they brought in the Beach Boys for a doubleheader, they drew over 50,000 fans. Sticking in the NASL, the Vancouver Whitecaps averaged about 20,000 fans per game. Then, they had Beach Boys night, and 56,255 people showed up. And moving over to Major League Baseball, but sticking in the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle Mariners averaged 10,900 fans per game. They had a Beach Boys doubleheader, and that game brought in over 37,000 people to the Kingdome. The New York Cosmos also did this in the NASL and drew 45,821 fans, which was their largest crowd of the season and would have been a sellout if it wasn't for the fact that this was being organized on only 2 weeks' notice. And the San Diego Sockers of the NASL did this, and increased their attendance from about 4,000 fans per game to 35,000 fans. The plan was foolproof. The Beach Boys would do a concert half an hour after the game ended, and the concert would be a whopping 27 songs long, comprising of all their hits. And everyone loved it, and the teams would get a guaranteed attendance boost. I could not find one instance from the summer of 1983 of the Beach Boys doing this and having it fail spectacularly. As Fred Moore, the president of PAX Productions, which was the company that was helping putting on these shows, said on why this worked, and why the Beach Boys were taking over the sports world in that summer, the Beach Boys' music is positive, it's universal, and it's upbeat. It appeals to everybody, and that's why these concerts have been so successful. So with that in mind, the wheels were spinning and were in motion to get the Beach Boys to come to Foxborough and play after the Patriots-Colts game. It was their last chance to get the ticket sales up and avoid the dreaded Labor Day slump that had plagued them every other year. And it seemed like a done deal, with one newspaper even reporting that the Beach Boys were all set to play there, that the Hail Mary attempt worked, and that everything was booked and ready to go. However, at the last minute, the Pats did a complete 180, and opted not to have the Beach Boys play. The team gave no reason as to why they decided to back out of the deal, and gave no reason as to why they decided not to have them perform. However, there was no concert, which meant no sellout and no last-minute push for ticket sales, as only 45,000 people showed up that day through the gates at Sullivan Stadium, with the game getting blacked out. Granted, I'm not sure how many people would have been in the mood for a Beach Boys concert after that game, where the Pats wiped out and lost 29-23 in overtime following a 52-yard fumble return for a touchdown by Johnny Cooks. However, even though this failed, the Beach Boys would eventually get the chance to perform during an NFL game, when they played the pregame show at Super Bowl 32 15 years later. To learn more about another musical act from that Super Bowl, click the card in the upper right corner. But of all the ideas for promotions in the history of the Patriots, this one might be the craziest on the surface, and yet, not all that crazy at the same time, seeing as they weren't the only sports team to attempt something like this in 1983. Far from it, in fact. Still, it would be tough to imagine something like this happening today, just because of the costs, and because most people at a football game today want to watch more football when they're done and make it back for the later games or the Sunday Night Football game, and not watch a concert of an artist that they're probably not a huge fan of. But in 1983, it almost happened, because that summer, the Beach Boys were performing everywhere under the sun after sporting events, from Denver to Seattle to Vancouver to Aruba to Jamaica to Bermuda to Bahamas to Key Largo. That was everywhere except for Foxborough. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.